The 6120XG blade switch has 9 external 10 gigabit Ethernet ports. However, their composition is different from the 6120G-XG blade switch. The 6120XG contains one 10 gigabit Ethernet CX4 or one 10 gigabit Ethernet SFP+. The port labeled 17 is a shared port and can be used for either 10 gigabit Ethernet CX4 or 10 gigabit Ethernet SFP+ connectivity. Please note, the SFP+ port always has precedence over the CX4 port. 5 10 gigabit Ethernet SFP+ ports. These 5 ports are dedicated 10 gigabit Ethernet SFP+ ports. 2 10 gigabit Ethernet SFP+ ports. Individually, the 2 ports labeled 23 and 24 can be used as either external 10 gigabit Ethernet SFP+ ports or internal 10 gigabit Ethernet switch-to-switch crosslink ports. Please note, the external SFP+ ports 23 and 24 always have precedence over the internal switch-to-switch port. All the SFP+ ports on this switch support SR, multi-mode fiber, LR, single-mode fiber, and LRM, multi-mode fiber, SFP+ transceivers. These ports also support a 10 gigabit base T mini GBIC that has an RJ45 light connector. Note that all 10 gigabit Ethernet SFP+ ports also support 1 gigabit Ethernet SFP transceivers. We are now ready to configure the 6120 blade switch with an enclosure bay IP address, eBIPA or eBIPA for short. The IP address within the OA subnet that you assign to the blade switch is used by a switch component known as out-of-band management and is abbreviated as OOBM or UBM. Access to the blade switch through this IP address is considered out-of-band compared to any other VLAN IP addresses that may eventually be configured on the blade switch. These latter VLAN IP addresses can be thought of as being used for in-band purposes. For example, the IT group that manages all switches and routers in the enterprise network will typically assign each network device an IP address in a management VLAN, such as VLAN 1. To configure the UBM component, you click on Enclosure Bay IP Addressing and then click the Interconnect Bays tab. Notice that the shared interconnect settings are already populated. This is because they are system-wide settings and apply to all devices within the enclosure. The default gateway is typically an upstream router or switch. We now click the checkbox for Bay 1 where the switch is installed and then enter the IP address we wish to assign and click Apply. After clicking OK for the warning about DHCP lease expiration, the UBM address has now been assigned. Let's ensure the UBM address has been assigned by navigating back to the Interconnect Bay summary. Notice the management URL is now populated. We now navigate to the Interconnect Bay 1 Information tab and notice there is now a link for the Management Console as well as the management IP address listed under the Information tab. If we now move to the Configuration tab, we can see a graphical representation of the front of the blade switch along with a graphical representation of the logical internal ports, including the UBM interface. Now that we have configured the UBM interface, let's review how you connect to the switch through the CLI using the OA. Here I am using a terminal emulator named Teraterm to telnet to the OA. Once I log in as a user with the administrator role, I can type help for a list of commands. Here I will ping the UBM interface of the blade switch I just configured to see if it's indeed reachable from the OA. If I want help with a specific command, I can type help and the command. For example, I need help remembering the command used to access the interconnect bay of the switch. It is also important to note the key sequence used to return to the OA's CLI. To do that, you type Control-Shift_. I will now press Enter to connect to the CLI of the 6120. The 6120 CLI is just like that of any other HP ProCurve switch. I press any key to continue, and then the command prompt appears. I can type Help, or the question mark key, or the Tab key for a list of commands such as configure, ping, show, and write. In addition, the 6120 supports tab completion. For example, I can enter the command show and then press the Tab key to see the list of available show commands such as show configuration, show IP, show UBM, etc. Next, I will use the show version command to see what version of software the switch is running. I will follow up with the show flash command to see what version of code is installed in the primary and secondary flash locations, as well as what boot ROM version is used, and the flash location used as the default to boot the blade switch. We will now go back to the 6120 CLI and configure an LACP trunk named TRK2 between the internal switch ports and the virtual interfaces of the newly configured team. Remember to untag this new LACP trunk in VLAN 2. Notice that the current mode of the team changes from transmit load balancing with fault tolerance to 802.3 AD dynamic with fault tolerance. Also, notice that both team members have assumed a full duplex transmit receive role, where team member 6 was previously operating as a transmit only role.